Hi everyone. Welcome to the second episode in our exciting new webinar series, What's Coming from 12D. My name is Lisa Stewart and I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator here at 12D Solutions. These webinars showcase features that will be included in upcoming versions of 12D Model and 12D Synergy to give you an idea of what to expect when the versions are released. We'll keep running these webinars regularly in coming weeks and recording them for posting on our YouTube channels with links through our website. During today's presentation, you'll be able to type your questions along the way. We'll put some instructions on the screen, and we'll answer as many as possible of those throughout the webinar. Then at the end, I'll read out some of your questions to the presenter if there's time. Today's webinar, CSI, an Interface for Stormwater Planning, will be presented by Mal Peaker of 12D Queensland. Mal has 25 years of industry experience covering land development, local and state government projects, and a little over 10 years specifically focused on 1D and 2D stormwater modelling projects, many of which were using 12D Model. Mal now handles support and training for our water users and writes macros for 12D Model. This exciting presentation will provide a quick look at the new stormwater interface for dynamic drainage, targeted at conceptual phase stormwater designs where users have limited or no input data, and providing a schematic representation of the network to enable rapid interpretation of the model elements. Over to you, Mal.
Thanks, Lisa. So what I'd like to talk to you all about today is something new that's coming in version 15. For dynamic drainage, and that is what we're calling Concept Stormwater Interface, or CSI for short. Essentially, CSI has come about because we were finding that with a larger number of people moving across into the dynamic drainage realm from, say, rational method analysis, the models are a lot more complex. There's more stuff that we can do with dynamic, and therefore there are more inputs that are required. And as a result, our interface was becoming more complex, and it's not always obvious what the right and wrong way to do things are in your dynamic model. So consequently, results are more prone to user error, and we found that our support loads were increasing somewhat. So we figured that it was time to really sit down and figure out a better way forward. So we went and spoke to some of our users who were doing a lot of this stuff, and had a bit of a chat about what sort of things they found painful and what they liked and things like that. So some of the feedback that we were getting were things like setting up a new model from scratch. It was taking too long. It was more difficult than they felt it should have been. Another point that they made was that level data wasn't always available. So from a concept phase perspective, they may not have any survey data, or they may not have any level data. It's really more of a higher level approach to the problem, and they found it tough to work within 12D under that scenario. One of the other things that was mentioned was creating duplicate links. Any of you who've done that will probably be able to relate to that somewhat. And generally, that the WNE, while it's excellent for doing detailed design, your high level, your detailed level of design tasks, it's a little bit too verbose for what they were doing in these early phases of the projects. There's just too much data and too many widgets on the screen. One of the other points that we found quite interesting was that people were struggling with model reviews for the dynamic stuff, and that is largely because in this case the reviewers had to be 12D aware, and a lot of them just weren't. A lot of the people reviewing the models had done nothing inside 12D, so they were finding it quite difficult to put their fingers on the information that they needed at any point in time. So we had a bit of a head scratching session, and sat down to have a bit of a chat about what we could possibly do to improve it. Well, one of the obvious ones was just to simplify the interface. Maybe look at using separate and smaller panels for the job. One of the other things that we talked about was making tins optional, and also giving people the ability to easily copy data between links and nodes and catchments. But one of the big ones that we were hearing was to allow analysis with single nodes, so no downstream pipe link. We also decided that it would be a good idea to put some guidance on the panels wherever we could, and the reason for that was just that a lot of the time some of the questions that were coming through on support were around some fairly simple things, and it was just a case of the help manual was too big and they felt intimidated by it or whatever it might have been. So what we wanted to do was try and make the interface a lot friendlier and a lot more feedback oriented so that they could find things out more simply. Another key point for us was that, as it says there, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we wanted to come up with a more aesthetic approach, something that would be obvious as soon as you looked at it, and you could quickly understand the model without having to open the network editor up and dive through pages of data to see what was what. It just had to be really simple. And so that brings me to CSI. So this is our main panel for CSI. Now it's been broken, as you can see, into 3 sections. So there's the nodes section, which has from the left catchments, and then nodes which have no capture, so no catchment attached to them, a manhole as some people would call it. Inlets which do have capture, basins and headwalls. And then in the link section there you can see we've got pipes or culverts, we've got engineered channels, natural channels, surface flow paths, pumps, weirs and orifices. The final part of it there is pretty obvious. It's your edit area, your solve and your review. So solving is something that we wanted to be able to do from here, and review is obviously a very important part of the process, so that's in there as well. So what I'll do now is I'll jump into each of the sort of panels that we're going to be having a bit of a closer look at later in the demo. The first one of them is catchments. So you can see that it's a fairly small panel, which was one of our goals. It's got limited amount of information that you've got to consider at any one point in time. You can see down the left there we've got the rainfall, the catchment data and the hydrology method. They're all sort of listed out there, and there are a couple of other things that we really wanted to be able to do. So we wanted to put some feedback regarding the number of storms selected and available for the chosen ARI, which you can see down here, 2 storms selected but 21 available for an ARI of 10. And we also wanted a graphical display of the temporal patterns. So this storms button here is how you get there. Now the reason that we did that was that at the moment, for anyone who's doing it, this is the sort of beast that you're looking at when you're trying to select storms. It's a lot of information, and yes, it's meaningful data, but it's not presented in a way that is really helpful for the eye. So what we looked at doing was presenting that in a slightly neater fashion, and this is how we've done it. So again, these 2 panels are quite small. This screen snip doesn't really indicate it, but as you click in these storm IDs down here, this will update dynamically. The graph will update dynamically, and you'll be able to tell very simply whether it's front loaded, mid loaded or rear loaded temporal pattern, which we sort of feel is going to be a lot more helpful for people. So one of the other things that we felt was going to be helpful for people, at the moment in the WNE, we have this great thing where you can select a TC method and it will automatically calculate your TC at runtime, figure out what's what. Sometimes one TC method just doesn't do the job, right? So we wanted to give people the ability to build a TC using multiple methods that apply to their catchment. So that's what you can see there on the right. You've got a variety of different methods that are available, and as you can see, this is a Friends equation that's being used here, and it's got a TC of 6.5 minutes, and the total TC down the bottom is actually 11.46. So there's another 5 minutes that have been added onto that at some point. Now the important part of that is if you're doing that sort of stuff, we wanted to make sure that you can go and change it, because nobody's perfect, right? And to be able to get it all right first time around, never going to happen. So we've given you a review and edit so that you can come and update any of the parameters that you might have made a mistake or a typo on, things like that. And we've also put a description in there so you can sort of, when you come back to it 2 years from now, you might actually remember what was what. So, and that brings me into the nodes. So the nodes panel, again, the goal here was to only show the necessary data on any page. We don't want a superfluous amount of information there that's just going to overwhelm you and make it hard to track and stay on top of, so we've kept it as minimal as possible. One of the points that was raised by a couple of the clients was that in larger models, if there were a lot of nodes and a lot of links and something happened during analysis and there was a problem at one of them, it was quite difficult for them to actually get back to that node. So we gave you the ability to search for a node based on its name. So that's a simple little panel where you can just start typing if you want. It will allow you to, just scroll down the list as well and select from there. But we just thought that might make things a little bit nicer for people working in those larger models. Something else that was sort of raised with us was capture curves. So we do have the ability at the moment to generate capture curves for all of the node types in your Drainage 4D, but the way it does it is probably not as good as it could be, so we've given you another way of doing it now. So you'll actually get this panel pop up if you click that button that you saw on the previous slide. The capture curves they've got a few options in terms of how you can display the data. You can show if you have both on-grade and sag curves defined for the node type in question. They will all show on the one graph, as you can see here. So this is a sag curve over here, as you can tell at the top. Now these ones here, you can see there's dashed lines and solid lines on there. You've got a choice to show all of the on-grade curves or just the applicable one. Now in this case, the applicable one is the solid one, right? So that's the one that matches the road grade and crossfall in question for this node. All of these other ones are the ones that are defined but don't apply in this situation. Now that can be obviously useful if you're looking at changing the grade or crossfall of your roadway and trying to determine what might happen to your capture in that scenario. So it's just a little bit more useful information that you might be able to put to good use. So the other thing we wanted to have a look at was basins. At the moment, if you want to turn off a basin, you need to just delete the data, which means if you make a mistake and you have to come back, you've got to put the data in again. So we've now given you the ability to just turn that off. So if you disable the use basin checkbox there, none of the basin data will apply on that node. So moving on to links. Again, we were trying to keep the link panel as simple as we possibly could. We've got a few new things here. So the link shape is now displayed on the main panel, and as you can see, there's a brown stain in the bottom of that one. So that is the sediment depth in that particular link. Previously, if you had sediment depth, it wasn't intuitively obvious. You had to actually be looking at the widget for the sediment depth to know that you had sediment depth applied. What we've tried to do here is give you a visual indicator that you've got sediment depth applied to that conduit. The other thing that we wanted to do was give you a quick and easy way to add or remove duplicate links at the click of a button. So let's take a road crossing culvert as an example. You'll usually have your culvert. Quite often you will have a weir over the top of the road. Previously, to create that scenario was a little bit painful working with the drainage strings. Now you can just click a button and it will duplicate the link, and then you can change its mode to a weir, and off you go. You can set your invert levels, you can do all of that stuff all in this one panel here. It will actually show it as 13 to 14.2 down the bottom here. It will have its own properties and whatnot associated with it. So it just makes it a little bit easier for you to be able to do that without having to go and create a drainage string in the background. We do all of that stuff for you. The other thing we did was give you the ability to search for links. Probably not as common as the node, but we figured we had it there, we may as well give it to you in case you needed it. Alright, so the last thing I wanted to sort of talk about with links is this idea of having some default sections. So obviously if you're in the concept phase of your job, you don't have any design data necessarily, you may not have any survey data that you can use, but you know that you're going to have some road type that's probably going to come into play at some point. You know, we've got these standard section types in here that you'll be able to use just for quick and easy setup, so that can save you some effort in, you know, setting values. And I mean, let's face it, when you're in this concept phase, being litre per second accurate is kind of a waste of time anyway. So, you know, whether your section is perfectly correct or just close is fine, right? So we've given you a few default ones that will ship. Here you can also add your own. You can add as many as you like, and then you can reference those from anywhere in your network that you want to. We've also given you the ability, if you click in this grid box here, you'll get the channel shape pop up like that. You can also see it at the top of the panel again. So you know, that helps you understand what it is that you're looking at any point in time. Alright, and now we'll move on to a bit of a live demo so that we can have a bit of a look. Alright, for those of you who watched Dylan's themes presentation last week, I'm just using the water theme here, and this one up here is the one we're looking for. It's our water concept. Okay, there's a lot of stuff in this panel at first sight. A lot of it this stuff here we'll sort of have a bit of a chat about in a little while. We'll pretty much just accept everything that's in here for now. There's a lot of color stuff. If you want to, you've got the option of just going with a single color. I'm just going to leave this as it is and we'll run with it. Okay, so we'll just create a catchment here first up, and we'll just edit that catchment. So this is our catchment panel which we saw before. You can see that we've got a hydro file and whatnot in here now. This is our temporal patterns, and you can see that as you click through them, you've got your graph showing it on the side there, which is how we can see whether it's, you know, front loaded or reloaded. Alright, we're just going to leave those three that we've already got selected. It's not too many to run with. I'm going to select some hydrology. We'll go with Ilsax, and we've got a choice of Hortons or Green Amp. I'll stay with Hortons on this one. I'll just set a nominal 1 hectare catchment, and I'll leave it as 0% imperv. Alright, so I did talk about the TC panel before. We're not going to go into detail with that, we're a bit pressed on time, but we'll just set some data in here. 1 millimeter on there, we've got, yeah, that's fine. Let's go with C and maybe 5 and 3 on that one. Alright, so once we've got all our parameters set, we can run it, and we should see our 3 storms start up, which we do. Let's give that a second to finish. Alright, we can see our results graph there. So in this case, our 60 is the peak, and we have a max runoff of 125 litres a second. So if we want to see the errors, we can see here that there weren't any. We've got a little summary in the panel there, 0 errors, 0 warnings. If we do want to see what was generated, we can just pop that up, and everyone would be used to that particular panel. From there, if you want more graphs, you can obviously open the graphs. You can have a look at your HTML as well, and kind of just, you know, dive in a bit more to see what's going on. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing there that we haven't sort of seen before if you're doing dynamic in 12D. Alright, so that's how easy it is to just get a catchment up and running. We can also create other node types. So there's an inlet, and if we wanted to, we could just join those together. So catchments are actually inlets. They are not a separate node type. They are an inlet, and so the macro is kind of seeing it as an inlet because it's got a catchment on it. So that's why the image here has changed. We're not going to worry too much about that for now. I will show you what happens when we close this macro down at the end. But we can go and create whatever we like in here in terms of links and things like that. So I can do that. We've got a channel. So obviously you wouldn't have a channel at the end, a head wall at the end of a channel, but this is a demonstration. So yeah, it's that easy to sort of create these things. And as I was saying, when you close this macro down, you can see that we do actually have a drainage string there. So those colors are the ones that I was talking about in the panel before. They are specific to the link and node types that were shown in the panel. You can set them to whatever you like. You can have one color if that's what you like. It's a nice way of, I've always found, of understanding what node types and link types you are looking at on the screen without having the network editor open. But that's a personal thing. You can do whatever you like. Okay, I'd just like to cover one more thing before we finish, and that is the model review stuff. So you can see here we've got an existing stormwater model. It looks like these road strings of some kind, curb. So they're probably bypass strings, I would guess. You can see that we've got some inlets or nodes positioned around here. We've got some links. They could be pipes. I'm not sure what that blue one is. These could be channels, I guess. But as you can tell, it's a little bit difficult to read it just off the bat. You can't sort of intuitively know what these things are or what settings have been applied to them. These ones down here probably look a little bit like basin links, maybe. So one of the goals of this CSI stuff was to make this sort of thing a little more intuitive. So what I might do first of all is I'll just turn these bypass strings off just to keep some clutter down. We'll fire up our macro again. You can see that it's remembered that I've actually done this for this model before, so it's already populated. The image size refers to the images that get put in at the nodes that you would have seen before. So the view for overlay, it's just using the current view that we've got selected. That's fine. Show catchments, show bypasses, show flow arrows. You can turn all of those things off if you want to. We'll leave them on for now and just say set and see what we end up with. So this is that same network, and as we guessed, these green lines here look to be bypass routes. They are sort of linking all of those nodes together, but we got a few other ones in here, these sort of purple colored ones, and it's not straight away obvious what they are, but they do look similar to the green ones, just with a different color. What they actually are is secondary bypass routes. So we have the ability of using existing 12D strings to map out bypass routes for our nodes, but we can have 2 or even 3 different bypass routes for a node, and they can apply at different elevations and so on. So this model, as it happens, does happen to have secondary bypass routes, which are these purple ones, and previously we didn't get any visual representation of that when we were looking at our network. We could see these strings here, but we couldn't see any of this stuff. So that's one of the things that we were sort of looking to try and improve on. The other thing you'll notice is that we've got these little catchment symbols sitting here with some dots above them, and you can probably guess what that means. This catchment here has only one or this node here has only one catchment, this node here has 3. So it's a really good way of understanding the data that exists on this network. Okay, so are we meant to have 3 catchments defined for all of these, or is one okay and these are special cases? It starts to raise some good questions for somebody who is performing a review of this network. You can also see some arrows which look like they represent flows, but if that's the case, we could have a problem here, right? So that shouldn't really be running in that direction. I might just turn these bypass routes off just to clear it up a little bit. That's better. So you can do that. You can turn off anything that's cluttering up your view. We've given you that ability. You might also start asking questions about why we have an inlet here that doesn't have a catchment on it. My guess would be that it's just there as a capture point for some of the bypass, but it does start to beg some questions about the way this is set up. Is this really meant to be a headwall, or has somebody just assigned the wrong KU value to it, and that's why it is operating as a headwall? So that it straight away points to some potential problems in this network for somebody who is carrying out a review. It looks like the pump is flowing in the direction it should be, so that this looks like a pump to me. So suddenly all of these things that we could see before that weren't obvious to us start to make a little bit more sense. You can actually see here that we've got 2 links running between these 2 nodes, and they happen to be running in opposite directions, which is probably not really what was intended. So that could be a typo in the invert levels that someone needs to go and have another look at. This is a node, so no capture capacity. That seems fairly reasonable. And down here we've got a channel. Fortunately 12D is not subject to the laws of gravity, so that water is going to stay in the channel for us even though it's upside down. But this one here is an interesting one. Now, I thought that was a channel looking at it before because of how wide it was, but it actually turns out to be just a regular pipe. This one up here is a detention basin. It didn't look like that before, but it actually is, and this wavy line here represents a basin link, which is a non-hydraulic link. So even though it looked like a pipe on the screen, it's actually not performing as a pipe hydraulically. It's just a basin link that is linking this detention basin to this node here. Similarly down here we have three basin links, and you can see that we're starting to have a bit of a problem here with how close some of these things are. So I can come back in here and adjust my image size if I want to, just to be able to clean it up a little bit. And there we go. We can see that there's looks like a pipe there between the head wall and this node. So this sort of gives us a much neater picture and a much neater way of looking at these things. And yes, you can plot these. So all of these images are a high quality image, so they will plot really nicely on PDF, and it gives you a really good way of potentially dropping out your results data using your drainage plan plots. We could have that sitting here beside our image, and suddenly the whole network makes a whole lot of sense to a reviewer who's looking at it this way. You still have the ability if you want to generate your graphs or drop out a HTML of your graphs for review, you can still do all of that stuff that you could do before. But yes, this is just giving you another way of looking at this stuff in a way that might make some more sense. For those of you who are perhaps more familiar with some of the other drainage packages out there, you might have issues with the black background. We've set this stuff up so that it looks just as good on white if you're more comfortable with a white background. So we've tried to accommodate people from all walks of life with this stuff, to try and make it a little more friendly for them, and hopefully we've achieved that. just before we wrap it up, I want to have a bit of a look at the node and link panels. You can see again, I was talking earlier about the conduit shape being shown on the panel there. This one's an egg. If we were to show it as circular, it updates pretty much straight away. Rectangular would do the same thing if I put a width in. So you can kind of see pretty quickly what your conduit has been set as in these scenarios, which is quite nice. So that was one of the things that I was talking to about the sediment depth. If I was to go back to, say, circular, just to make it easier, and I made that, if this was, say, a normal conduit, you might not have a lot of sediment in it. If it was, a driveway culvert or something like that, it might be more like that, depending on the authority that you're working in. So yeah, you've got this visible indicator of what you've got set there, which is quite nice. And as I was saying before, if I need to duplicate it, straight away we've got, it's duplicated that original link, and we can set whatever conduit type we want on this, whatever conduit shape we want. So we can have that one as circular if we want, and this one up here will still be set to whatever it was. So you can tell which one you're looking at that way. Alright, and we did sort of look at the node stuff. The nodes are fairly straightforward. Your hydraulics will be... So this is the feedback that I was talking about on the panel. This needs to be widened a little bit. So in some of these things, these are the problem areas for people who are operating in models, not understanding what these things do. So we've tried to provide a little bit of feedback on the panels here for you, just to make it a little bit simpler. And yeah, hopefully that's going to help people out when they're trying to set their models up and understand what's going on. So I think that's probably it. Alright, well that's probably all I've got to say at this point. I might just hand back over to Lisa for some questions. Thanks for joining us today, guys, and hopefully you've got something out of it.
Thanks for that, Mel. Sorry, just had a little problem with my sound there for a moment. So I think we'll just read out a couple of the questions that have come through in today's presentation. So we had one from Matthew. So will the build a TC method from multiple methods be incorporated into the traditional network editor?
Yeah, so we've talked about that. We don't see a reason why we can't put it on the WNE. It should be fairly straightforward, in theory. So I think it would be a really useful thing for people to have in their WNE life, I suppose. So we've certainly discussed that in-house, and I think that was one of the things that we were going to try and achieve. So I can certainly discuss that further with the developers.
Great. And can this work then be used for detailed design as the project progresses?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was one of our primary goals. This was going to interrupt your workflow as little as possible, so you can start up your project using this. And if you get to the point where you are at detailed design, you can fire it up in the network editor. You can do things like risers and tri-meshes and design strings and all that sort of stuff, and off you go. So this network will basically be established by this tool as in a manner that means that you can open it straight up with the WNE and hit run. So that's the idea there. That's what we wanted.
Okay, good question there from Greg. So I think we might leave the live presentation there for today. And if anyone has any further questions, then yeah, they're always welcome to email those through or to get in touch about that. And of course, these features and many more will be delved into in far more detail at our 2021 Tech Forum, which will be an online event this October. So we're going to, we'll have some information coming out about that. I think there's an email going out with full details of that and how to register next week. The recording of today's webinar will be available in coming days through the webinars page on our website and on our 12D Model YouTube channel. Everyone keep an eye on our emails and social media for details of our future webinars in this series, which will include MetaConnects on the 26th of May and several great topics through June. So subgrid sampling will probably be of interest to anyone with a bit of a water bent, because Rob Graham's presenting that one in June. We'll have a What's New in 12D Synergy coming up and Pavement Manager too. So that concludes our presentation for today. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at future webinars.